Defending Israel with David Harris on JBS is made possible in part by a generous gift in memory of Eric and Mira J. Spector, the Paul and Lynn Late Family Foundation, To Life, to Love, Barbara and Bob Goodkind, the Patricia Worthen Ullman Foundation,
Hello JBS viewers, I'm David Harris and this is Defending Israel. On several occasions on this show we have spoken with faculty and students at what some are calling ground zero for the anti-Israel, anti-Zionist campaigns in the United States, Columbia University. And once again, Columbia University has been in the news, and that's why it's a special treat to have with us on the show today Alon Levin, a graduate student at Columbia University and someone who's been very active in the pro-Israel movement. Alon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, David.
Alon, first of all, for our viewers, can you tell us a little bit about your background? I know there's a Soviet connection to the background.
Yes.
But tell us how you got from where you began to where you are today.
So my family's from the Soviet Union. They actually fled as refugees in the late 80s after being refuseniks and a whole mess with the KGB. I was born in Israel personally, and I moved to the US.
Meaning that when they left the Soviet Union eventually, they moved to Israel.
They made their way to Israel through a long series of strings, and they met in Israel, got married. I was born there, and we moved to New York when I was 6. And I've lived in New York for the past 20 years. I've gone to high school here, college here, and now grad school here.
Okay, so college is actually relevant because we're going to come back to your alma mater during the conversation. But for college, you went where and studied what?
I went to the Cooper Union, where I studied electrical engineering for both my undergrad and my master's.
Okay. And JBS viewers, you may remember that some time ago there was an incident at Cooper Union, and though Alon was not there, he had friends who were there. So we're going to come back to it. But you're at Columbia, you're a fourth-year doctoral student in
Yes.
the engineering school. And people might think that PhD students live in a world of their own. They're not involved in campus issues. But you are involved in campus issues since October the 7th.
Yes.
Why and how?
Well, I very much hoped to stay out of all these political games. I came to Columbia to do research, and when October 7th happened, and immediately we were flooded with a barrage of anti-Israel hate, anti-Israel propaganda. Students for Justice in Palestine woke up from their slumber of a few years to announce the great victory of Al-Aqsa flood. I just couldn't sit idly by. Part of it was because of my family history. I have dissidents in my family and activists for Israel who've stood up for Israel in the Soviet Union and faced the consequences for it. So I felt that here in New York, where I'm living a relatively cushy life, I can't just sit idly by as these sorts of things are being said about Jews, about my people. And so on the very first day back at Columbia, after October 7th, there was a big pro-Israel rally. We printed out hostage signs, we stood on the lawn, we had a minute of silence, and the anti-Israel side, consisting of student groups like Students for Justice in Palestine or Jewish Voice for Peace even, they at the same time decided to hold their own rally. Now, at this time, Israel was not fighting a war yet in Gaza. At this time, it was purely defensive. It was not clear even what was going on the ground still in Israel. And to see this celebration of terror, the celebration of the massacres that were going on, waving the Palestinian flags triumphantly as if such a great victory was won against us, the Jewish people, and bring that onto our campus and essentially telling us, you are the losers, we are going to do the same thing to you here. Almost the entire Jewish community at Columbia couldn't just take this. And so many of us started becoming active in the space when otherwise we wouldn't have been. For example, Professor Shai Davidai, right? He immediately became a very vocal activist for Jewish civil rights on campus and more broadly. student groups such as SSI, Students Supporting Israel, and REA, which is a student group that is mainly aimed at the Orthodox Jewish community. They became active in holding events and sometimes leading protests, holding moments of silence, things of this sort, writing petitions. The graduate students, a lot of us from STEM, gathered together to form our own community in order to also promote Jewish and Israeli interests on campus. For example, when the Graduate Student Union at Columbia started supporting the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement, BDS, and trying to hold other anti-Israel measures, so a lot of us graduate students got together in order to fight this, combat this, whether through the union itself, trying to find other legal means to combat this sort of repression. And really that's just been the state of affairs for the past 15, 16 months, where essentially I feel like I have to work two jobs. On the one hand, there's my research, and on the other hand, there is the activist, the pro-Israel work that I have to do.
Although, let's break down. Columbia University is a huge institution. Can we break it down perhaps by looking first at the students, then at the faculty, then at the administration, beginning with the former president and now the interim president?
Yes.
And perhaps if you have some perspective on the role of the trustees as the sort of custodial guardians of the university. Talk to us first about the students. Who are these students that are celebrating Hamas, who are intimidating and threatening Jewish students, including yourself, I understand,
yes,
at least in one particular incident? Who are these students? I mean, what drives them ideologically, intellectually?
Let's begin with the core group of anti-Israel organizers. These are the heads of Students for Justice in Palestine, the heads of Jewish Voice for Peace.
I think we have to say in air quotes, Jewish Voices for Peace.
Jewish and
Right.
peace,
Right.
exactly.
Exactly.
They formed a confederation of organizations called Columbia University Apartheid Divest, in part through willing club participants who just did not know the situation and want to be involved in something, a big movement such as this, and in part by actually bullying some of these organizations to sign on with threats of cancellation and other, new age phenomena. But the core group themselves, many of them are themselves, they claim that they are of Palestinian descent. Many of them are Muslim. Some of the members from Jewish Voice for Peace are from disaffected left-wing movements with very little actual Judaism to show for. And some of them, some of the Palestinian students who are running this actually themselves have connections to terror organizations, but there's no way to say it otherwise. There's at least one individual who brags about having family who were in the Al-Qassam brigades and active in terror in Israel. There are students who have ties to other anti-Israel organizations who are causing riots and protests in other parts of the country. New York, for example, within our lifetime, which itself is an organization that has ties to Samidun, which is connected to the PFLP, which is a recognized terror entity by the United States, Europe, Israel.
Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
Yes.
Do you feel or sense, or have you managed to observe any direct foreign links? I mean, the Iranian regime, for example, has touted the fact that they are supporting some of these movements. I cannot specifically say Columbia. In an organization I'm involved with, ISGAP, the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, they have documented massive funds coming from Qatar, especially, to American universities. Can you observe any of these foreign influences?
The clearest example that I can think of is an event held, if I remember correctly, in April of 2024. This was an event that was actually promoted by an official Barnard Center. It was the Center for Research on Women's Studies, Gender and Sexuality, if I remember correctly. And this event was hosted by Columbia University Apartheid Divest and ran jointly with Samidun. They brought in speakers from Samidun, to discuss how to build resistance networks, how to avoid receiving any consequences for the activism that they do, promoting the wearing of masks to avoid being identified. And this was something that was held openly on campus with direct support, with a direct connection to an entity that is recognized as a foreign terror organization. I can't see how much clearer it can get, but to my knowledge, we haven't seen any consequences for the students who ran this yet.
Okay. The keyword consequences, I hope we'll come back to that. But let's move to faculty for a moment. Columbia was the home of the late Edward Said,
yes,
who not only as a scholar himself, but who wanted to create generations of scholars that would follow him, that would essentially penetrate American higher education, carrying with them his views of the Middle East, the study of Orientalism, et cetera, et cetera. What's going on in the faculty at Columbia?
There's immense faculty support for these protests, for these anti-Israel actions.
Throughout the university?
Corely focused within the humanities, generally. You see a little bit of support from one or two STEM professors in the sciences and engineering here and there, but primarily it's focused in the humanities within Barnard, Union Theological Seminary as well, surprisingly. And the support is really, quite frankly, shocking. First of all, there's the ideological support, right? What they teach in the lectures. There was a professor, A. Qayyum Ahmed, who in November or December 2023 already started floating the idea that there's a genocide going on in Gaza to his medical ethics class. So in the middle class, he would lecture about how Israel is committing genocide in Gaza to students who are there to learn about something completely separate, something completely different. You see lectures, for example, by Joseph Slaughter on the morality of airplane hijackings. So that, first of all, provides the moral and ideological, academic even, underpinnings of these protests, anti-Israel protests and movements, which it's more correct to say that they've grown from just anti-Israel to anti-Western as a whole. Now,
would you also characterize them as anti-Semitic?
Oh, 100%. 100%, without a doubt. Just last week, on Tuesday, there were protesters who were handing out flyers with jackboots crushing a Star of David.
Right.
And they had the word anti-Zionism on them. But how much clearer can you get? This is clearly Soviet-era, Nazi-era propaganda being shown.
Is there faculty pushback?
There is faculty pushback, primarily from the Israeli and Jewish faculty, and as well other faculty and staff members who are concerned about this as well.
Because Shai Davidai, whom you mentioned, has been very much in the news, but is he alone? Or
He's not alone at all. There's actually a very large support system by the Jewish and Israeli faculty for the students and for the Columbia environment as a whole. There's an organization, the Faculty and Staff Supporting Israel at Columbia, who routinely highlight when anti-Semitic incidents take place on campus. They provide support for the students, and this is in part in partnership with the Institute on Israel and Jewish Studies at Columbia. Mm-hmm. So they've actually been very supportive, and they don't shy away from taking the stance and taking the actions necessary to fight back against this.
Okay, let's get to the administration.
Yes.
There was one president. She's gone. There's an interim president. We're talking since October the 7th.
Yes.
How would you assess the reaction of the administration of Columbia University to everything you've seen and described?
The previous administration had no clue what they were doing whatsoever.
No clue?
No clue whatsoever. They were caught completely unprepared. They did not know how to handle this whatsoever. And we even saw this at the congressional testimony by former President Minu Shafiq, where she did not learn the lessons from her predecessors.
Right, the three from Penn, Harvard, and MIT
Correct.
were on December the 7th, and then she followed separately.
In April.
And you say she did not learn the lessons.
She did not learn the lessons. Her answers were nonsensical to the questions from the committee. I was actually in the room during that hearing, and there were audible gasps and laughs from the Jewish students who were in the room listening to what answers she was giving. And then that day when we get back to campus, everything is on fire because that's when the encampments began. Just to give
April of 2024.
Yes, that same day. That same day we came back to flares on campus and it looked like it was burning down.
Okay, that president left. There's now an interim president. Any change?
The current president is, it seems like she's taking some actions. It's not entirely clear where those are going to lead. It's not entirely clear how much her actions and the actions of the university as a whole are due to the change in the United States administration, due to the threats to withhold funding and other...
From the new Trump administration.
From the new Trump administration, yes. At the beginning of the semester, things were quieter. I will say to President Katrina Armstrong's credit, she did manage to calm things down on campus to a certain extent. To give context for this, you can really sort of group the students who are in these protests into two categories. You've got the main primary organizers, who are those the heads of SJP and JVP and CUAD and such. Then you have many students who are just there along for the ride. They want to be part of a cool new movement. They don't know what anything actually means. If they see people wearing keffiyehs, they're told that this is the moral thing to do, they join in. Now, that can only go so far, because when the going gets tough, when it gets too cold outside, when finals begin, when exams begin, they start peeling off.
Or job applications.
Job applications begin, right. So at the beginning of the semester, the new Columbia administration played a little bit of a bread and circuses game, where there were a lot of events being held on campus. They would bring in all sorts of food festivals and trucks and rides and whatnot to campus in order to sort of show how good the campus experience could be if you don't protest. And that kept things a little bit quiet for a certain amount of time. But the core group of organizers continued, the organizers and their direct lackeys, which is not a small group, by the way. It's still around 100 to 150 people who routinely come to these protests and rallies. They're continuing their actions. Not only they're continuing, but they're stepping up in their rhetoric. They're stepping up in the sort of actions that they're taking. For example, in the Museum of Terror, or as it's called by the press.
Which caught the attention of Barry Weiss and the Free Press.
Yes. This was, they called it Hin's House in commemoration of the takeover of Hamilton Hall on campus back in April. When I went there, you could see they were actually members of CUAD were leading classes and teach-ins about how to take sort of resistance actions against the university and against any forms of genocidal, imperialist, whatever powers that they see. They were giving instructions about how to avoid security. They were giving instructions about, they were giving resources and lists of textbooks to learn anarchist techniques. So,
were you yourself ever personally targeted?
I am lucky in the sense that I'm from the STEM world, and generally things are quiet there. But I have been personally chased during the All Out for Lebanon rally in September or October of 2024.
You were physically chased?
I was physically chased by an individual who is known to have ties to Within Our Lifetime, which is this larger body.
So this person was identified?
He was identified. He was previously arrested for accosting the police.
Any consequences?
To my knowledge, not currently.
So this person is still on campus?
He's still on campus. I saw him at the Hin's House event.
So he's a matriculated student at Columbia University.
Yes, yes.
Who physically chased you, presumably in a threatening way.
Yes.
And as far as you know, no consequences?
To my knowledge, not yet.
Lon, I want to dial back to what you said at the beginning because it's relevant. You mentioned that your parents both came from the Soviet Union.
Yes.
When you discuss the Columbia situation with your parents, for them, are there any echoes of their own Soviet experience?
It's funny you mention this. Literally, yes. Very much so. My father even told me at one point that the reason that he and his family left St. Petersburg in 1990...
Which was then Leningrad.
Then Leningrad, yes. The reason that they left when he was a teenager was because there were anti-Semitic gangs starting to roam the streets as the economy turned for the worse. And his family decided that they cannot do this anymore, and they had to leave, and they left to Israel. My dad told me at some point over the previous year that what we're seeing right now in New York, we're seeing right now especially on college campuses, is worse than what he remembers it was when they were leaving in 1990.
And I would add, as someone who was very familiar with that period, the Soviets very skillfully used anti-Zionism often as a mask for what was naked anti-Semitism.
Yes.
And I'm guessing that your parents may have mentioned that too along the way.
We have. So I'm lucky in that I grew up learning all these stories, hearing about their experiences there. So when this started up, it was only surprising in the sense of I didn't expect it to happen in my lifetime. But all the tactics, all the techniques, all the propaganda, all the imagery that we're seeing is directly from the playbook that was used by the Soviet Union since the 60s in order to repress the Jewish population within the borders.
So the Soviet Union died in 1991, but the Soviet playbook is alive and well.
It's alive and well, and the dividends from Soviet infiltration in the 60s are playing out now.
Coming back to breaking down the university into students, faculty, administration, the last I mentioned were trustees. Trustees have the fiduciary responsibility for the well-being of the university, including its reputation.
Yes.
Do you have any sense as a student of the trustees' role in protecting that reputation or addressing these issues?
The trustees seem to be playing a PR game when the real issue at the core is the anti-Semitism, the rot within the faculty and the students that are being accepted. And you don't have to take my word for it, you can take their word for it. If you look at the congressional report that came out from the Committee on Education and the Workforce.
This is the one that referenced Senator Chuck Schumer and what he allegedly told.
Correct. There were leaked messages between the trustees and Chuck Schumer's staff, where the staff were telling the trustees that they don't have to worry for much longer. Once the Democrats are in power again, then it's no longer an issue. All this, the focus on college campuses is solely a Republican issue.
Okay.
This didn't play out after the election.
No, not at all.
And we see this now. Just recently on the news, we saw that Columbia hired a lobbyist in order to work with the Trump administration. So they're scared, right? They're scared about losing their funding from the government.
But we're told there's as much as $3.5 billion going from federal government institutions to Columbia University each year.
Yes.
Does that sound right?
I don't know the numbers exactly. What I do know is that if Columbia loses funding, I'm personally going to be out of the job because I'm supported by government funding for my research. It's unfortunately a big irony that the schools within Columbia that will be hit the hardest by the loss of funding would be the medical campus and the STEM world, right, which are not the primary cause. That's not where the students who are protesting, that's not where the root problem lies. It's in the humanities.
I also want to come back to something else that you said earlier on. You went to Cooper Union.
Yes.
As an undergraduate, a great university, famous for its engineering program, its architecture program, and its arts program. After you left, there was an incident that was widely reported in the library where Jewish students appeared to be barricaded while anti-Israel students were banging on the doors and the walls.
Yes.
Any insight into what happened or how it could have happened at Cooper Union?
It's a real shame actually, because I love the school. It's a great school and I had a wonderful time. I learned a lot. It brought me to where I am today. It seems like again the issue stems from the faculty there, and specifically from the art faculty there.
Not architecture, not engineering.
I do not know too much about architecture. I don't want to say anything about
engineering.
them. Engineering, for the most part, has been quiet or calm because everybody's working. Nobody has time for this. Everybody's there to come in, get their degree, focus on their studies, and then go out and improve the world. In the art school, you see a lot more of the activist type. What is their art for, if not to promote some sort of agenda, to promote some sort of change? And with the way that social movements have been the past 2 years, a lot of that has become inflicted upon Jews. In other words, that the change has to be against Israel. And so that incident took place, I believe, at the end of October. So it was still very fresh.
Just a few
right
weeks
the
after
massacre.
October 7th, yeah.
Yes. And so I had some friends in the library at this time. And from what I understand is that there was another march or rally or some sort that was primarily consisted of art students. And they saw that there were Jewish students in the library. I don't think they had anything related to Israel with them, but it's known that the Jewish students are in support of Israel. And they started banging on the glass and making their way towards the door, towards the door of the library. For reference, the library has clear glass walls that you could see through. So the protesters outside started banging on the windows when they saw these groups of Jewish students, and then came around to the door trying to get in. That is my understanding of what happened.
But as an alum, it came as a surprise to you?
I was very shocked. I was not expecting, Cooper Union is not a household name as the Ivies are. And yet suddenly the whole world is talking about it, because not for its academic excellence, but because of this incident, this disgusting incident that took place.
Alon, unfortunately, we have just a couple minutes left, and I want to try and squeeze in 2 questions, which is unfair to you, but you're an engineer, so...
I'll do my best.
You can go straight from the question to the answer. If you had just a couple of moments with the current president of Columbia University, and she turned to you and said, give me 2 or 3 things that you think need to be done and done quickly, what would be on your list at the very top?
Number 1, immediately ban the masks.
Ban the masks.
Ban the masks. If you don't know who the perpetrators are, you cannot hold them accountable. Okay. And that brings me to point number 2. There has to be accountability. There are clear rules, both within the university and in general in New York. When those rules are broken, there have to be consequences. The students cannot feel like they can run the university and bully and harass whoever they want. Same thing goes for the faculty. The faculty cannot be allowed to bully, to harass, and to promote this anti-Semitic agenda.
So again, to stress the point to JBS viewers, you're saying that as of now, after 15, 16 months, there is no serious accountability, there is no serious consequence for this behavior.
If there is, it's opaque.
It's opaque,
It's
at
opaque.
best.
At best, that's right.
Okay, so, and my second question. You've had your discussion now with the interim president of Columbia, and President Trump calls you to the Oval Office. He's a busy person. He has a short attention span as a result. What should the government of the United States be doing about a situation like this? And Columbia is only, it may be ground zero, but it's only the tip of the iceberg.
First of all, I want to say this is the quickest job promotion I've ever had in my life. First of all, the agitators are very often not U.S. citizens.
Including at Columbia.
Including at Columbia. We know that a person cannot obtain a visa to the United States if they are a supporter of terror. The same should apply to current holders of visas, including student visas. These people do not belong on our campuses. These people do not belong on our streets. These people do not belong in our country. If they openly support an anti-Israel, anti-US, anti-Western terror organization, they need to go. The next step would be to look at foreign sources of influence into the universities. What is corrupting our youth's minds? Because the youth define the direction that the country is going to go in. We need to correct course and fix where this generation's minds are focused on.
And you said yourself you're an interested party, but to those who say universities should be punished financially, how would you respond?
Universities need to feel that they cannot get off scot-free. There has to be accountability, just as there should be accountability for the students and the faculty who are supporting this, there needs to be accountability for administrations that turn a blind eye to this. There has to be accountability for the university. I really hope that I do not get my funding cut. I really hope that the university...
So do we. It's certainly not as a result of this program.
Right. I really hope the university comes to its senses before it comes to that.
Quick yes or no. Would you advise a high school student today considering Columbia University, a student who is also proudly Jewish and actively pro-Israel, a place to go?
I wish I could say yes. I really wish I could say yes. But it's difficult for me at this time to do so.
Okay. I wish we had more time alone, but I'm grateful that you came into the studio. JBS viewers, if you want to have hope and optimism about our collective future, it's going to be because of young people like Alon Levin, who has shown the courage and the pride to stand up for what he believes and what I think so many of us share. I'll see you again next week. This is David Harris, Defending Israel.